Hello and welcome to Ignited Minds. Welcome to the discussion of the Hindu newspaper analysis. It's 19th of July 2024 and we will be discussing the news articles which are highlighted on your screens. These news articles are basically important for your exams pertaining to UPSC, state PCS or other exams. You can see the editorials and the articles which are highlighted over here have to be dealt in detail, and some of them we already have discussed, like the finance commission we have already discussed yesterday. However, the question on superstition needs to be discussed properly because UPSC also asked questions regarding this in its mains. Next important article talks about the autonomy, which is important when we talk about the international diplomacy and India traversing its way in the uh, bipolar or multipolar world order again. Next, there is one more important concept about the enemy properties, which you need to understand that what are enemy properties and how are they dealt in India. One more important article which came in news last month and this month also in one of the Supreme Court petitions is about foreigners tribunal and their functioning. We'll also see that we have already discussed the appointment of two new judges to Supreme Court, just a reference to that. You'll also see how the legacy of Vasco da Gama is toxic in its nature, and this article pertains to smoking and the introduction of tobacco, because the question which UPSC asked in 2023 was that which are or which of the below crops was introduced from the new world or the old world to new world. So the new world is the colonial world and the world which was you can say that discovered or lately colonized then later on. So with all of this discussion keeping in mind, let's begin the discussion with the word of the day, and the word of the day goes bilk. What is bilk? It's actually to cheat somebody out of what is due, especially money. Take it. It hinders or prevents or evades the payment, and it escapes either physically or mentally. Then he billed his creditors, means that the ones to whom he owed his money, वो उनको पैसा वापस नहीं दे रहा है. That is bill, पैसा वापस ना देना. ठीक है. So let's start the discussion. As our tradition has been always that we start the discussion with a UPSC prelims PYQ to align ourselves with UPSC strictly. The question which was asked in 2024 prelims talks about and asks the students to see the context and the text of Article 368. This question says that as per Article 368, the Constitution of India, the Parliament is empowered to amend any provision of the Constitution by way of. So what are the three words and which of the three words is actually mentioned in the Article 368 text? That is why I recommend my students that whenever you read Lakshmikant, although the updated version of Lakshmikant, the 15th edition of Lakshmikant, which was released last year, has kept this well in mind, and it has, I guess, introduced more tables into it, in which it has basically highlighting the text of the Constitution. But still, you must keep a bare act with you. Okay, to understand that what are the actual what is the actual text of the Constitution and understand the constitutional language particularly. Done. So the answer to this question was D, that all of the three words are there mentioned in the Article 368, and the text of the Article 368 says that Parliament may exercise in its constituent power, amend by way of addition, variation, or repeal any provision of the Constitution in accordance with the procedure. Remember the word procedure laid down in this article. Done. This was the article which was this was the word that it's actually only the procedure not the power, which was in discussion when since the first Constitutional Amendment Act of 1951. Then onwards till Keshwananda Bharati case and 24th and 25th Constitutional Amendment Act. You should go through all of that. The article here starts and the discussion starts with the Karnataka's bill, as we have not yet discussed this bill because this was in news last month. Okay. This bill talks about the reservation of Karnataka state employment of local candidates in the industries, factories, and other establishments. So the provisions of this bill are basically, first, it's about the management positions and non-management positions in the state of Karnataka. It says all the industries, factories, and other establishments should reserve positions with respect to 50% of management posts and 70% of non-management posts for its local candidates. Who are local candidates? Basically, those who have birth and domicile in the state of Karnataka. Domicile of state of Karnataka for last 15 years. Remember the provision very well. And there are other eligibilities to be qualified as a local candidate, like they have proficiency in the Kannada language. One thing. Second, the educational requirement of these local candidates should be in Kannada. Kannada as a language should be there, and they shall pass a proficiency test of Kannada language. Next most important eligibility is to train, and the training of these local candidates, that is, the industries and establishments in collaboration with government should train the local candidates within 3 years. 3 years of training to local candidates to make them fit to the jobs. If then the sufficient local candidates are not available, then the industry and establishment may apply for relaxation of the from the act, and then once they are relaxed, they can then recruit people from outside. So this is it. Now, what are the actual demands? The actual demands are for 100% reservation, which is passed amid the demands for 100% job reservation for Kannadigas. 100% reservation for Kannadigas. In the establishments. We also have seen a similar bill with respect to the state of Haryana last year, I guess. The bill talked about the private reservation, the reservation in industries and establishments, similar to this also. Now, the reservation, it was actually the Sarojini Mahishi report, which recommended that 100% reservation should be for locals in Group C and reservation in Group C and Group D jobs of central government and public sector undertakings in Karnataka. So why is this local reservation and what is the local reservation actually? It is basically due to the concerns about job shortage and domestic electorate. Two things. One is the domestic electorate, that is, आप लोकल्स के लिए काम करोगे तो आपको लोकल्स वोट दे देंगे और वो आपको वोट देंगे तो आप बाहर में रहोगे, इसलिए आप उनके लिए डोमेस्टिक पॉलिटिक्स कर रहे हो या रीजनल पॉलिटिक्स कर रहे हो. Second is about the job shortages which is there in everywhere, because we have recently seen दो जगह पे it was stampede like situation where there were only 10 or 40 posts to be filled. What is the demand for local reservation? Because of the lack of opportunities and the employment situation which has been there in the states post COVID-19 lockdown. Since the LPG reforms and the jobless growth, we have seen these economic reforms have created the jobless growth, and this joblessness has now increased so much, which is now popping up in such demands. There is agrarian crisis also, which is a reason for such demands. Done. So what are the arguments actually in favor and in against of this reservation is like balancing the fundamental rights and state intervention. Because it said that the reservation in private employment will create an unprecedented intrusion by state governments into fundamental rights. Because see, fundamental right 90 will not confuse these kinds of things and these kinds of bills with Article 14, 15 and 16. It's basically Article 19 which deals with this. It says that Article 19 gives us the freedom to trade and business. And once this freedom of the establishments and the corporations is curbed upon, then the issue rises that state is intervening into the fundamental rights of the citizens. Then there is exodus of low-paid workers, because once these low-paid workers who otherwise are getting sufficient jobs will now face a situation where they have to leave the state and go to some other place to find work. These are some of the arguments which are against this, but there are arguments in favor of this, because it says that there are discriminatory HR policies, that is human recruitment policies, which are being followed by all of these establishments and MNCs. It was highlighted by a survey which was conducted in 2019 by the Assam Premji University. It found that SC/ST communities were overrepresented in low-paying jobs and underrepresented in high-paying jobs. Why is such thing happening over there? Because they are the ones who are exploited on this basis that they will give you job in these MNCs, and once they get job, they get a kind of recognition in the society which makes them vulnerable for this thing that they will get less. It's similar to the women empowerment and not women empowerment, basically to the women employment in the sugarcane fields, in the agricultural fields, and in the contract farms, where they get meager or less salary because of being on the vulnerable sections. So the recent most news was that this bill is now on hold because 2 days back it received its you can say it received approval from the Karnataka cabinet, but due to massive opposition by the industry and establishments, this bill was now put on hold. Next topic is about, this is not a topic which I am going to discuss. We will be discussing railways in its entirety tomorrow, because I'm expecting tomorrow there will be an editorial on this thing. If not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, there will be an editorial. Mark my words, there will be an editorial on railways. And with that editorial, we will discuss the whole of the railways and its problems, its initiatives, like the Project B or the Kavach, everything. Okay? Because last month also we saw accidents similar to this kind of accident. What you need to do is, once we start that discussion, you should first understand the accident happened in Motiganj and Jilahi railway station. इसका नाम है. There is the derailment of railways, जिसकी वजह से ये होता है. 31 people injury हुई है. Last month भी हमने देखा था, same accident हुआ था, not in UP but other state. Now I want you to pay attention to this. There is this Shakambari festival, ठीक है, or Sakambari festival, whatever you call it. It's basically in the respect of goddess Durga. It's actually the Kanaka Durga temple, which is in Vijayawada, and it has begun Shakambari. Who is Shakambari? or she is also known as Shatakshi. She is the goddess of nourishment. You can highlight this important point whenever you talk about India's malnutrition. Okay? She is regarded as the incarnation of Mahadevi. She is identified as Lakshmi and Durga in Hinduism. Basically, this goddess appeared on earth just to bless human beings with fruits and vegetables. Okay? To restore the strength of human beings. Understood? To restore the strength of human beings. She actually came down to earth to end the asuras who have been holding humans back from Vedas, and then she did all of that. She killed the asuras and then she established this. Every year this festival is celebrated over here, and this is all about this festival. Basically, the temple is located in Karnataka's Badami district, and there are various other temples of Shakambhari Devi, including one in Uttar Pradesh, one in Vaishno Devi, one in Rajasthan Sambar Lake, and basically Shakambhari is worshipped in the nine number among the nine deities of Navaratri. So it also coincides with the festival of Navaratri after the beginning of Vaishno Devi. Done. Now, this important editorial talks about the elephants and the death of elephants in Kerala. There are 800 elephants who died in 8 years in Kerala. Remember this fact, just this fact from the news. This fact can be directly quoted in the conservation measures regarding elephants, either it's Project Elephant or anything, because this year only we mark 30 years of Project Elephant. Project Elephant in 2024. Once you understand this fact, then we can proceed that Project Elephant was launched by the Union government. This is basically the map of Kerala. And you can remember the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, which are highlighted over here. We have yesterday also discussed it, so I won't be discussing it today. I'll be focusing myself on elephant only. Okay. I'm just giving this map over here. This Project Elephant was launched in 1992 by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. This scheme actually helps and supports states to manage wild Asian elephants and their population through financial, remember these terms, financial and technical assistance. So it provides two things. One is financial assistance, another is technical assistance. Okay. These are the points which will be asked in prelims only. Okay. Recently, we also see witnessed this year only that government notified the captive elephant transfer or transport rules 2024, which is the conditions of elephant transfer from one state to another state who are captive elephants. Those elephants were under the strict regulations. Now, what are Asian elephants? Because this project is for Asian elephants. Asian elephants, India has the largest and most stable population of Asian elephants, with over 60% of all of them in the wild, and they call India as their home. So, recorded till date, around there are more than I guess 29,000 elephants, more than 29,000 elephants, so till recently, and there are around 31 elephant reserves in India. And the recent most additions were like Dandeli Elephant Reserve in Karnataka, Sinfan Elephant Reserve in Nagaland, Lemru Elephant Reserve in Chhattisgarh. These are the elephant reserves which were recently. As per 2017 census, only Karnataka holds highest number of elephants with 6,000 individual elephants living in Karnataka only. And Karnataka being the largest, then Assam, and then Kerala. So when you talk about the species of Asian, these Asian elephants, Asian elephants we have three species, subspecies of Asian elephants. One is Indian elephant, Sumatra, and Sri Lankan elephant. Three subspecies of Asian elephants. Three subspecies. Okay. New species which is supported in the Bajati head. The largest of these terrestrial mammals is Asian elephant. It inhabits the grasslands and forests across 13 countries of South and Southeast Asia. Their environment ranges from dry to wet climate. As you consider them in comparison with African savanna elephants, the Asian elephants, they are in herds, but their herds are smaller in size. While the African savanna elephants, their herds are larger in size. And they move in these herds. These are smaller in size. These herds are usually headed by the largest and oldest female. Oldest and largest female. That is why the UPSC also asked the question that they are matriarchs. Okay, they follow the matriarchal structure in their family. Next important point is that the Asian elephant has the longest known gestation period. It's not the African elephant, but the Asian elephant has the longest gestation period. That is, it ranges from 22 months on average. That is 680 days. Okay. And the female elephant gives birth to around four. Yes, it gives birth to calves every 4 years. Between the age of 14 to 45, and the interval increases to 5 years by the age of 42, and then 6 to 16 in these 60 years. Understand the fact that they do have the age of reproduction from 14 years to 60 years. Just the gestation period, just the cycle of menstrual cycle which elongates. If you talk about the conservation status of these, as per IUCN, they are endangered, and as per the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, they are in the Schedule 1. And as per CITES, they are in Appendix 1. If you talk about the conservation measures which have been taken by the Government of India and others, like the Project Elephant and its objectives are to conserve, plan, combat the illegal trade, prevent deaths, and restore habitat, ensure their health care, community development, and others. Major threats to elephant population are habitat loss and fragmentation, human-elephant conflict. Other measures which have been taken are, other than this Project Elephant, is habitat restoration, anti-poaching measures, and we have developed anti-poaching squads patrolling and rewarding the poachers when they give information, reward the people when they give information about the poachers who undertake illegal hunting. Legal provisions, we have Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which provides protection to these elephants. Now, this is all about the elephants. Next editorial talks about the enemy property. Okay. So I have given a brief summary of this editorial, and this editorial is in news because recently Indian government has begun auctioning the properties which belong to former Indians. Okay. Understand the definition. They belong to former Indians, those who are not Indians at present time. Why? Because they are now holding Pakistani or Chinese passports. So they have already shunned their Indian citizenship. They are no longer citizens of India. Remember this thing. It's not NRI, it's not OCI or anything like that. These are those people who do not belong to India now. Earlier, but they were Indians. They have now shunned the property. And only two passports. One Indian, this Chinese passport, and another is Pakistani passport, which is considered over here. That is enemy property. These properties are classified as enemy properties under the Enemy Protection Act of 1968. UPSC has gone beyond its conventional uh, formatting and conventional answer these questions in prelims multiple times, and ऐसे टॉपिक्स यूपीएससी पूछ रहा है. जैसे इस बार आर्मी से 3 क्वेश्चन थे, ठीक है, वैसे ही पिछली बार फॉरलो वगैरह बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस ऐसे आ रहे हैं यूपीएससी में जो आउट ऑफ दिस कन्वेंशनल सिलेबस के हैं. So these questions, as per the studies, are basically inspired from editorials and articles which come over different these newspapers. That is why I am covering this article. This is very much important, this background, for your prelims point of view. Then comes the data. Not required. Legal frameworks you should understand and remember that there is an act. What is the name of the act? Enemy Property Act 1968. ठीक है? No need to remember the date. Understand that there is an act. ठीक है? It defines the enemy subjects. It defines the enemy firms. And it also includes the legal heirs and successors to the Indian citizens. So it is an act, and act usually जब भी हम बात करते हैं ना यूपीएससी के प्रीलिम्स के पेपर्स की, इट टॉक्स अबाउट, जब भी ये किसी चीज पे बात करेगा लीगल पर्सपेक्टिव में, तो क्वेश्चन में पूछे जाएंगे दो चीज. ईदर इट डिफाइंस, ठीक है, अगर डेफिनेशन में ये पूछ रहा है कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन डिफाइन कर रहा है तो स्टेटमेंट गलत होगा. अगर ये पूछ रहा है कि एक लॉ या एक्ट डिफाइन कर रहा है देन वो ठीक होगा. व्हेन इट टॉक्स अबाउट टू अ सब्जेक्ट विच इज येट नॉट कंसिडर्ड, लाइक जैसे गिग वर्कर्स है ना, ये आज से 5 साल या 10 साल पहले तक इंडिया में कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं था, ठीक है, लीगल फ्रेमवर्क में, बट नाउ it is very well established and there are multiple laws on gig workers. Usually UPSC asks this statement that this is some subject, whether from residuary subject list or whether that subject is in news or not, like the enemy properties is covered under any law of India, or this subject in Indian legal jurisprudence there is no law which defines this. Okay, so it usually talks about no law or presence of law in such subjects where it asks out of the conventional themes. Okay, so remember the broad idea of this. That's it. No need to remember this case study which was discussed in the editorial. What are the recent developments? There is e-auctioning. Bus, remember this, that these properties can be e-auctioned. They can be electrically auctioned, ठीक है, over portals. ठीक है, अभी बोलोगे कि सर पहले तो एनिमी प्रॉपर्टी है, उसके बाद वो प्रॉपर्टी किसी और को बिलोंग करेगी, फिर वो प्रॉपर्टी पे डिस्प्यूट चलेगा, फिर वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के पास जाएगा, फिर उसका ये ई ऑक्शनिंग कैसे हो जाएगा, ये तो लंबा प्रोसेस है, इतना सोचने का जरूरत नहीं है. It's enemy property. Once declared enemy property, it can be auctioned easily through e-auction also. But these are some of the measures points which you need to remember. There is around 3,400 crores of property which is at disposal, which is classified as enemy property. Next editorial talks about India. We already have discussed it in detail. USA and Russia. And India traversing its way, कभी west, कभी east, कभी west, कभी east, and maintaining a balance, walking the tightrope to keep its strategic autonomy intact. ठीक है, sorry. This editorial talks about बहुत सारी चीजें हैं यहाँ पे, मैंने बहुत क्रिस्प मैनर में आपको दिया हुआ है यहाँ पे, बहुत ही ज्यादा क्रिस्प मैनर में, ताकि आपको चीजें याद रहे और आप इनको कोट कर पाओ। ठीक है, सबसे पहली चीज, मोदी जी चले गए मॉस्को। ठीक है, रशिया इंडिया समिट हो गई, वहां पे नाटो की समिट हो रही थी, दूसरी साइड में यहाँ रशिया में इंडिया और रशिया की समिट हो रही थी। ठीक है, द फर्स्ट इंस्टांस आफ्टर रशियाज इन्वेजन टू यूक्रेन इन 2022, मोदी जी चले गए कहा, मॉस्को। यूएस के ऑफिशियल्स ने इस चीज को क्रिटिसाइज किया। वंस दे स्टार्टेड क्रिटिसाइज, उन्होंने क्या बोला? सबसे पहले आते हैं यूएस के एम्बेसडर एरिक गार्सेटी। ही सेड दैट in times of conflict there is no such thing as strategic autonomy. Next, the national security advisor of USA, Jake Sullivan, he said that a bet on Russia in long term as a reliable partner is not a good bet, that you should not bet on Russia because it won't be your long term partner. ठीक है, it's not a good bet for India. ठीक है, next, India Russia relations. Overall, if you talk about the trajectory, it has remained steady. Russia is a proved and tested friend of India. Multiple times, proved and tested friend since the ages. Okay? What is the main issue? That India has refused to align with the Western stance on Russia-Ukraine war. कि इंडिया ने बोला नहीं, आप sanctions लगा रहे हो, आप लगाओ, हमको नहीं लगाना, हम नहीं लगाएगा। ठीक है, simple, very simple. So India's position on Russia-Ukraine war, India maintained its strategic partnership with Moscow. India also expanded its energy cooperation. India refused to condemn the invasion at international fora. ठीक है, just lower down this sentence. ठीक है, India refused to condemn. No, instead of this statement, write that India called the war as a attack on, not particularly attack, India just highlighted the war as disrespectful to the territorial sovereignty, and India highlighted this issue at multiple international forums that we always, countries bilaterally, should respect the territorial sovereignty. This thing aligns with India's Panchsheel also. Okay, remember this thing. Bas, that's it. Once you write these statements properly, diplomatically, you will get good answer, good marks. The concept of strategic autonomy. What does strategic autonomy means? That कोई भी country अपने decisions खुद ले रही है just to serve its own national interests. Once it serves its own national interests without external pressures, कि बाकी लोग चाहे कुछ भी करें, रशिया हमें जो बोले वो बोले, हम नहीं करेंगे, हम तब करेंगे जब हमारा इंटरेस्ट फुलफिल हो रहा हो। रशिया के साथ हमारे इंटरेस्ट्स थे, हमने उसके साथ डील किया। ठीक है, यूएसए को नहीं था इंटरेस्ट, यूएसए का वहां पे कुछ नहीं हो रहा है, वो वहां से कोई बेनिफिट नहीं है, यूएसए रशिया का पावर हेजेमनी का बैटल चल रहा है, तो वी आर नो लॉन्गर गोइंग टू अलाइन आवरसेल्व्स एज पर द इंटरेस्ट्स ऑफ यूएसए. We will align ourselves as per our own national interests, because it said that in international relations the only thing which works is what? National interests. Okay, there is the whole foreign policy is basically you can say an extrapolation of national interests of a nation. Okay, remember this thing. And if you talk about India's foreign policy, to post-independence India first started non-alignment, that multi-alignment, and now India's foreign policy is multi-directionally aligned. ठीक है, it takes care of everything because it has to balance itself. India earlier focused on Asian solidarity and mobilizing the third world voices, which is still continuing. As you can see that last year in 2023 we also held the Global Democracy Summit, Voice of Asia Summit also. ठीक है, कुछ initiatives हमने last year भी लिए थे about the Asia's voice to be raised on the international platforms. Also, when there was Cold War era, we at that time also had stronger ties with USSR, and we maintained our autonomy with the other powers also. When we talk about the current global order, which is termed as the post-COVID global order, India has shifted from unipolar to multipolar world, and now the world has shifted from unipolar to multipolar global order. There has been a rise of China, there has been a rise of Russia, China being competitor of USA, and USA tackling itself with its internal balancing, setting its house in order as the discussion and the discourse set by Trump and Biden. Okay. Uh, Basically a concept which emerged out of the discussions of Henry Kissinger. That is something which you need to understand. Okay, that is the global order, and USA being focused on offshore balancing rather than being an active partner in the world conflicts. India's current foreign policy approach, it balances the great powers without joining the alliances. Remember this. And India-Russia relations in terms of energy, defense partnership have grown over the period of time, and we should also analyze that how India is maintaining its strategic autonomy. Okay. There is a potential question which can be asked in the upcoming mains about this India walking a tight rope between the global powers when it comes to, because India has to emerge as a global power, India has to walk a tight rope between the global powers, India has to ascertain its position at the global forums like UNSC, United Nations, and talk about the climate justice and climate leadership also. So India has multiple challenges when we talk about the international relations and foreign policy. Lastly, not lastly, there is next editorial which talks about the tree plantation schemes and their challenges. This editorial basically talks about the deforestation, degradation, and tree plantation as a solution. It basically highlights this thing that we consider that कि जितना हम एफोरेस्टेशन करेंगे, जितने नए ट्रीज लगाएंगे फॉर क्लाइमेट चेंज, जो बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस कर रही है, वी कंसिडर इट एज अ सिल्वर बुलेट फॉर क्लाइमेट चेंज, कि हम ट्रीज लगा देंगे और अब क्लाइमेट चेंज वापस रिवर्स हो जाएगा, बट दैट इज नॉट द केस. Basically, the editorial says that there is global deforestation. World Bank has estimated that around 10 million square kilometers of forests have been lost since 20th century. So UN's decade of ecosystem restoration is from 2021 to 2030. It aims to restore around 350 million hectares of degraded land. The goal is to generate $9 trillion in ecosystem services and sequester around 26 gigatons of greenhouse gases. These 3 points are the best introduction which you can have for questions about environmental restoration, global diplomacy, or climate diplomacy, or afforestation measures, whatever the questions pertaining to the greening of the environment. Okay. Next, the editorial also highlights that there is India's Van Mahotsav, which was launched in 1950 by K.M. Munshi. This is the annual tree planting festival in the first week of July, and it has contributed to improving the forest area in India. There are global tree planting initiatives which have been highlighted, like 1 trillion project of World Economic Forum, in which 1 trillion trees will be planted. Great Green Wall of China, and there is one more Great Green Wall in Africa. 10 billion tree tsunami, which is in Pakistan, and Bond Challenge. These are some of the global initiatives for tree plantation. However, the editorial says that these initiatives are being criticized because there is limited community participation, क्योंकि local लोगों को अगर आप participate नहीं कराओगे in international जो ये initiatives है, तो ये ऐसा होगा कि ग्राउंड लेवल पे काम नहीं हो रहा होगा, बस ऊपर ऊपर पेपर घूम रहा होगा, just to raise funds and start collecting funds and then use them for other purposes. Okay. And there are these challenges are these initiatives are criticized because they have inadequate post planting measures. Post planting measures मतलब एक बार आपने पेड़ लगा दिया तो लगा दिया ऊपर वाले के नाम पे जयराम जी की, उसके बाद छोड़ दिया. The point is there is special care with respect to plants. You cannot do that. ठीक है. Once you plant it, you have to take care of it. You have to keep watering it. You have to check for insects. You have to check for invasive species. You have to check for whether the roots are healthy or not, whether the plant is in healthy condition or not. एक बार लगा दिया दूसरे दिन किसी ने उठा के वो ले गए plants, वैसे नहीं चलेगा. So post planting measures is not proper. There is promotion of monoculture, that जैसे popular trees, जैसे there are tree initiatives like सफेदा, है ना, there are multiple trees like water hyacinth. What you do is, in terms of raising a forest, you just plant. There is one more tree, Senna spectabilis, which was in news recently. Some plantation initiatives, they plant those trees which create a forest within 10 to 15 years. And once they create forest, they create big trees just for the fact that they have replaced the forest. Okay? But that is not actual replacement, because the original forest which was there, the original forest which was there, which was now removed, or the original forest which was removed for some developmental project, and now you're planting some monocultural or some one type of species in a single type of species in other place, that thing cannot compensate the carbon sequestration of the original plant, and it cannot compensate the climate change effects which have been created by the deforestation and afforestation respectively. So there are ecological concerns with regard to this, because tree plantation in certain locations, like for example grassland, में आपने ट्री प्लांटेशन कर दिया, जो नेचुरली ग्रासलैंड था उसमें ट्री प्लांटेशन कर दिया, उससे उल्टा जो इकोसिस्टम है वहां का वो डैमेज होगा. वन थिंग. सेकेंड थिंग, you cannot consider grasslands as degraded lands for tree plantation. So there are two studies which you can highlight your answers in your answers. One is William Bond's study and another is the study by Joseph Feldman. Remember these two things, and there are other challenges also which are highlighted over here. You can check out these out. India has some specific challenges because India has some specific goals. हमारा सबसे important goal है that हमें restore करना है 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. We also have to understand this thing that 5.7 million hectares of forest land are lost for non-forestry purposes since independence. और इसको कैसे वापस restore किया जाए, that is one more important challenge. In the recent G20, India is the only G20 country fulfilling Paris Agreement commitments. This was recently claimed by our Prime Minister. India has achieved an additional carbon sink of 1.7 billion tons. This is something which India has achieved in terms of the restoration and climate change. Next important editorial is about the superstition in India. There are some perspectives given by the two persons who have been interviewed in this editorial of the Hindu. I want you to go through these perspectives but understand two things. That is the examples which are given over in this editorial. One is about the Snan ritual. ये last to last week news में था. ठीक है, इसमें होता क्या है? Basically there is a ritual जिसमें होता है the lower caste people, they are made to roll over the leftover food eaten by the Brahmins to supposedly attain punya, that is the spiritual merit. This practice highlights the intercaste and intersection discrimination and the superstitious beliefs. One is this practice. Next practice is about the Bhole Baba, the recent case, a former police constable who turned into self-made guru or god. He is also highlighted in multiple editorials as Godman. It was his congregation was attended by lakhs of people, and we have seen a death of around 120 people. There is the issue of witch hunting, on which UPSC has already asked a question in tribal districts. There was a case study in ethics paper on witch hunting. Women from socially and educationally disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged communities are often targeted. Despite the tribal communities consisting of only 8% of the Indian population, there is a notable lack in the dedicated welfare scheme for these victims. Okay. Remember these three practices, these three superstitions, and then refer to the two discussions which are there in the preceding uh, these two slides. Okay. Now this editorial we have already discussed yesterday. फाइनेंस कमीशन को हमने बहुत डिटेल में डिस्कस किया था कल भी कि इसके recommendations क्या है, कैसे काम करता है, क्या करता है, अभी क्या concerns है, क्या challenges है. Further आज के editorial में there were some points which are important. You can just go through this. This is similar to what we discussed yesterday. I have gone through all of this. I have made the concise points. You can just go through this. Download the PPT from the Telegram groups itself. There are key disagreements about this editorial and about center and state. The editorial highlights कि कुछ यहाँ पे डिसएग्रीमेंट्स है सेंटर और स्टेट के बीच में. अब ये डिसएग्रीमेंट क्या है और इन डिसएग्रीमेंट्स पे हम कैसे काम कर सकते हैं. The editorial will highlight the issues like percentage of tax proceeds to states. States argue for more funds than what are recommended by Finance Commission. The divisible pool composition, because कल भी मैंने बोला था कि सेस एंड सरचार्ज जो है वो अलग से सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के पास जाता है ना. अप टू 28% ऑफ सेंटर्स टैक्स रेवेन्यू इज सेस एंड सरचार्ज, और ये वो पैसा है जो नॉन डिविजिबल है एज पर द फाइनेंस कमीशन. ये तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन साहब बोलता है कि ये डिवाइड करना ही नहीं है, स्टेट्स को देना ही नहीं है. तो ये वो पैसा है जो बस सेंटर रख रहा है, और 28% है तो फिर स्टेट्स के पास बचेगा क्या. बाकी जो परसेंटेज बचा हुआ है 72% उतना ही डिविजिबल है. दैट इज वन मोर इशू. तो येस्टरडे के पीपीटी में और आज के पीपीटी में दोनों में ये इश्यूज हैं, दोनों में ये सेम डिस्कशन है. यू कैन जस्ट स्क्रॉल दिस एंड मूव फॉरवर्ड. नाउ द इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल is about the tribunals, foreign tribunals, foreigners tribunals. Are these constitutional bodies? Are these statutory bodies? How they function? What are their role and what not? We will discuss it in detail. So recently, this Assam government has instructed its border police. Remember, there is a force which is known as border police. अब ये border police कौन है, क्या काम करती है, आगे देखते हैं. It said कि आप जो भी नॉन मुस्लिम्स है उनके केसेस अब who have entered India before 2014, उनके केसेस अब फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल में मत भेजो. क्यों ना भेजो? क्योंकि ऑलरेडी सिटीजनशिप अमेंडमेंट एक्ट 2019 इंप्लीमेंट हो चुका है. अब अगर वो इंप्लीमेंट हो चुका है तो केसेस वहां भेजने का कोई फायदा नहीं है, उनको डायरेक्ट जो है सिटीजनशिप देना है. अब उनके केसेस को फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल डिस्कस करेगा तो कोई लाइक मैटर नहीं है, मतलब कोई सब्जेक्ट मैटर ही नहीं है डिस्कस करने का, बिकॉज ऑलरेडी अंडर द एक्ट दे आर टू बी गिवन द सिटीजनशिप. नाउ व्हाट इज दिस फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल? दिस फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल इज अ क्वासी जुडिशियल बॉडी. इट वाज फॉर्म्ड अंडर द फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल ऑर्डर 1964 and Foreigners Act of 1946. These are the two acts which empower it. Okay, which form the Foreigners Tribunal. So this Foreigners Tribunal is a statutory body. They are exclusive to Assam only. Assam से बाहर ये नहीं है. इस Foreigners Tribunal में जजेस होते हैं, एडवोकेट्स होते हैं, सिविल सर्वेंट्स होते हैं जिनका जुडिशियल एक्सपीरियंस रहा हो पुराना. अराउंड 300 Foreigners Tribunals हैं, but only 100 are functioning as per the state home police political department. What is border police? Border police जो कि यहाँ पे लिखी हुई है, this was established in 1962 as a part of Assam Police Special Branch. ठीक है, असम पुलिस के अंदर ही एक स्पेशल ब्रांच है जिसका नाम है बॉर्डर पुलिस. तो इसको आर्मी के साथ कंफ्यूज नहीं करना है, ठीक है, या आईटीबीपी के साथ कंफ्यूज नहीं करना है. ये असम पुलिस के अंदर एक सब ब्रांच है. This is made as an independent wing in 1974. It was headed by Special Director General of Police Border. सिंपल, वेरी सिंपल. बस इतना ही याद रखना है कि ये असम पुलिस का ब्रांच है, इसका आईटीबीपी के साथ कोई लिंक नहीं है. नेक्स्ट, फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल का फंक्शनिंग, ये काम कैसे करता है? इसके पास पावर होते हैं सिविल कोर्ट का। अगर कोई भी केस इसके पास आता है, सबसे पहले ये क्या करता है फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल, ये एक नोटिस भेजता है उस इंसान को जिसका केस आया है इसके पास कि वेदर दैट पर्सन इज अ फॉरेनर और इज अ सिटीजन ऑफ इंडिया। वो नोटिस उसके पास 10 दिन के अंदर अंदर चला जाता है। 10 नेक्स्ट 10 डेज के अंदर, 10 प्लस 10 डेज के अंदर अंदर उसको वापस यहाँ पे एविडेंस सबमिट करना है फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल के अंदर। और जो ये केस है ये 60 डेज में क्लोज होना चाहिए, 60 डेज। अब प्रॉब्लम क्या आ रहा है? प्रॉब्लम है कुछ यहाँ पे। देन once foreigners tribunal decides the case, it can send them either to detention center which is now called as transit camp, ठीक है, or whatever the judgment comes out of this, if these are, or they can simply say no, they are citizens of India and they hold the rightful documents, ठीक है। अगर डॉक्यूमेंट्स नहीं है तो तब ट्रांजिट कैंप में भेज देंगे। यहाँ तक तो क्लियर है। अदर रूट टू फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल इज कि अगर इलेक्शन कमीशन ने किसी वोटर को नॉमिनेट कर दिया या किसी वोटर के साथ लिख दिया दैट दिस वोटर इज क्लासिफाइड एज डाउटफुल वोटर, then this will go to foreigners tribunal, and the people who are excluded from NRC go to foreigners tribunal. So three things, one is कि किसी इंसान का केस डायरेक्ट फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल चला जाए, ए का केस किसी ने कंप्लेंट कर दिया फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल पे, दूसरा इलेक्शन कमीशन ने डी नोट डाउटफुल वोटर डिक्लेयर कर दिया, ये एनआरसी में उसका नाम नहीं आया, तो तीन लोग फॉरेनर्स ट्रिब्यूनल के पास जाएंगे, 60 डेज के अंदर अंदर ये केस डिसमिस कर देगा। जब ये नोटिस भेजता है तो ये नोटिस, अगर आपने वो 12th फेल वाली मूवी देखी होगी तो वो जो पुलिस वाला नोटिस लेके आता है अबाउट द सस्पेंशन ऑफ दैट पर्सन और टर्मिनेशन ऑफ दैट पर्सन, वो जो आई डोंट रिमेम्बर द नेम ऑफ दैट एक्टर, ठीक है, उसके जो फादर होते हैं उसमें, दिस नोटिस जब वो चिपका रहा होता है उसके दरवाजे पे वो नोटिस, सिमिलरली ये नोटिस जो है ये लोग भेजते हैं एंड इट्स यूजुअली हंग ऑन ट्रीज, पोल्स और समवेयर लाइक दैट। अब प्रॉब्लम यही है और यही क्रिटिसिज्म है, और इसके साथ साथ क्रिटिसिज्म ये है कि ये बस लोगों को तंग करने के लिए, उनसे पैसा निकालने के लिए एक नया तरीका है। Even Supreme Court in July only gave the order, set aside the foreigner tribunals orders and said that they are doing grave miscarriage of justice. Remember this thing, that this is the issue with foreigners tribunal. Next editorial talks about the two Supreme Court judges who have been appointed, ठीक है, और अभी उनने oath लिया है, two new Supreme Court judges, they have took the oath of the office, ठीक है। Who administered them the oath? The Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud. He administered the oath of office to the Justice Koteshwar and R. Mahadevan. बस remember the point. कौन ओथ दिलाता है नए जज को जो अपॉइंट हो रहा होता है? चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ इंडिया। अब ये कोटेश्वर सिंह कौन है? ये वही है जिसके बारे में एक एडिटोरियल आया था पिछले वीक में, दैट ही विल बी द ओनली जज फ्रॉम मणिपुर, ठीक है, और पर्टिकुलरली नॉर्थ ईस्ट, और वहाँ की वॉइस को रिप्रेजेंट करेगा जुडिशरी में। एंड बिकॉज मणिपुर इज continuously in the crisis from last I guess 1 year now or more than that. So that was all about this news. Remember that there are two judges and how they are given the oath. This editorial talks about some tax reforms and tax administration reforms for the growth of capital markets. It suggests that what budget expectations are there regarding the capital market. Capital market is a part of Indian economy GS paper 3, and capital market is very much pertinent and important for your economic growth, investment, the long-term growth, and much more. We will see what is the current situation of India. As we see that the current market of India is of bullish sentiment, there is positive sentiment in the market, and there is significant growth in retail investor participation. डीमैट अकाउंट्स जो है वो हमारे बहुत ज़्यादा इंक्रीज हो गए हैं, 160 million डीमैट अकाउंट्स आर देयर, सो पीपल आर पार्टिसिपेटिंग इन इन्वेस्टमेंट, ठीक है, in the capital market. They are purchasing shares, they are purchasing and investing their money into the capital market, ठीक है। So once this thing happens, this is the point where you can tap this investment. Once you tap this investment in the right direction, then the country will go in the right direction of growth. So what are the factors which drive the growth? Basically, there is seamless digital onboarding process कि आपको 2 मिनट भी नहीं लगते हैं डीमैट अकाउंट खोलने में. ठीक है, आपको पहले की तरह नहीं है कि 1 महीने का प्रोसेस है, बैंक गए, बैंक में अलग डिपार्टमेंट है, वो डीमैट सेक्शन अलग है, वहां पे बहुत सारी फॉर्मेलिटीज है, वो सब खत्म हो गया. आप किसी भी पोर्टल के थ्रू रजिस्टर कर लीजिए और अपना ट्रेडिंग स्टार्ट कर लीजिए. सेबी के इनिशिएटिव्स टू प्रायोरिटाइज कैपिटल फॉर्मेशन एंड ईज ऑफ इन्वेस्टिंग इन द कैपिटल मार्केट. देयर आर लो कॉस्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट ऑप्शंस which maximize the returns for small investors. ठीक है, अभी आपको ऐसा शायद आपके सर्कल में भी 2-4 दोस्त ऐसे होंगे जो ये इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कर रहे हैं स्टॉक मार्केट के थ्रू, जो स्टॉक मार्केट में चीजें कर रहे हैं कि आज मैंने ये खरीदा, आज मैंने वो खरीदा, आज मैंने इसका बॉन्ड खरीदा, इसका शेयर खरीदा. ठीक है, दीज आर पीपल देयर, नाउ यू ऑल्सो नो देम. आज से 10 साल पहले कोई उनको नहीं जानता था. देयर वर फ्यू पीपल, वेरी फ्यू पीपल, ठीक है, जिनको लोग जानते थे कि स्टॉक्स में काम करते हैं, शेयर मार्केट में काम करते हैं, शेयर मार्केट में ट्रेड कर रहे हैं. सॉरी. So what is the impact of all of this in the economy when the retail investor section, when the retail investment expands? It's projected that retail investors will expand to 300 million by in the next 3 to 4 years, and we have seen the monthly new account openings have increased from 3 lakh to 4.2 million. ठीक है, 4.2 lakh, 4.2 million, sorry. The impact on economy will be that increased equity will be now available for the entrepreneurs. How? Because people will invest and this investment will be in the economy, and that investment will now be available for the entrepreneurs to take loans out of banks and take the money and start entrepreneurship, start their enterprises. The monthly inflow averages from 75,000 crore to 80,000 crore. Okay, and the annual influx is around rupees 9 to 10 lakh crores in the market. These are some of the issues, some of the points which are important for you to understand, that not to basically remember this data. Some of it can be remembered to just quote in your paper, like for example you can quote this data which is easy to remember, that 160 million demat accounts are currently in the country. Okay. You can also remember this fact that 300 million in 3 years is projected investment expansion of the retail sector. So what are the future opportunities and government and regulatory bodies role? SEBI is the whole manager for this investment of flood effectively. ठीक है, and once this investment flood comes in कि बहुत सारा इन्वेस्टमेंट एक साथ आ रहा है, तो SEBI is the one, एक ऐसी बॉडी, स्टैट्यूटरी बॉडी जो इसको रेगुलेट कर रही है. There is need for government policies to leverage this capital influx strategically. As I said कि जब भी ऐसा फ्लो आता है इसको टैप करना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी हो जाता है. Then only economy will grow in proper direction. Otherwise क्या होगा, लोग पैसा उठा के कहीं और इन्वेस्ट कर देंगे, इंडिया का पैसा इंडिया से बाहर इन्वेस्ट हो रहा होगा और वो चीज़ हमारे लिए दिक्कत पैदा करेगा. ठीक है. There are future opportunities also, like the potential for India to become a capital market hub for the subcontinent. ठीक है, India to become a capital market hub for the subcontinent. It will attract the small neighboring countries to use India's market infrastructure and invest over here. It will also help in leveraging the capital market as competitive advantage for India, like the software exports which India is doing. ठीक है, India सॉफ्टवेयर एक्सपोर्ट्स बहुत ज़्यादा करता है, सॉफ्टवेयर IT ग्रेजुएट्स बहुत ज़्यादा एक्सपोर्ट करता है. ठीक है, और वैसे ही इंडिया का कैपिटल मार्केट जो है कैन बी अ हब फॉर दिस फंक्शनिंग नाउ. ठीक है, बिकॉज देयर इज टू मच ऑफ दिस मार्केट सेंटिमेंट इज हाई, दैट इज क्रिएटिंग द कैपिटल मार्केट बूम इन इंडिया. This editorial would be the last editorial which we will be discussing today. It's actually about tobacco. ठीक है. It says that tobacco was originally cultivated by the Native Americans and it was introduced to South Asia by the European traders. Remember this fact. These European traders were instrumental in spreading tobacco use in the region though smoking was alien to Indian ethos and culture. Remember this point. Okay. One thing, this question and a similar question was asked in UPSC prelims. Second is, this question is the effects of globalization, ठीक है, which pertains to GS1 society. ये आपका टॉपिक है सोसाइटी के पेपर में. सेम ये एक पॉइंट के अंदर आपके दो पॉइंट्स निकल के आते हैं. देन द कल्टीवेशन ऑफ टोबैको यील्ड्स ओवर 22,000 करोड़ रेवेन्यू. ठीक है, 22,000 करोड़ का रेवेन्यू है, which now is being discussed over here, that this is a dilemma between the two. One is the CSIR, another is the I guess agriculture. I guess one is the CSIR, that is the Council for Scientific and Research, which tries to I guess to decrease the effects and decrease the concentration of nicotine through genetic interventions in the tobacco plant. And another is the Council of Agricultural Research, ICAR, which basically wants to increase the agricultural yield so that there is more of revenue for the farmers of tobacco community. The total economic cost of smoking in terms of healthcare expenditure and the productivity losses amount around 1.8 trillion $8 trillion rupees. Okay. To understand the economic aspect of this also, tobacco consumption perfectly fits the definition of a pandemic. How it is a pandemic? Because it causes over 8 million deaths worldwide annually and affects millions more through chronic diseases as passive smokers. The scale and severity of tobacco related diseases justify the classification of this tobacco as an pandemic. Okay. There is further explanation of this editorial over here, that what are the historical contexts, as we discussed the Vasco da Gama's voyage and his legacy in this term, and the menace which was brought to India by the colonial traders. And what are the health impacts of tobacco? You can see that lung, mouth, throat, esophagus, pancreas and bladder cancers, respiratory diseases are there, cardiovascular issues are there, which increase the India's out-of-pocket expenditure on healthcare, okay, which creates the health-related poverty, because this thing pushes, I guess if you remember the data from COVID, but there were more than 8 million people who were pushed into poverty after COVID. Similarly, out-of-pocket expenditure pushes annually, I guess, in thousands and millions of people into the poverty bag. Okay. So that is one more issue. The economic cost of this tobacco is that tobacco accounts for 2% of the India's agri exports, and it employs around 45 million people, this tobacco economy only. Despite the economic benefits, the smoking का जो cost है, health expenditure का जो cost है, productivity loss का जो cost है, it's around 1.8 trillion rupees. So these facts have to be remembered and mentioned in your points. Next important point is about ethical and policy dilemma. This is the point जहाँ पे I can assure you one thing, if you write this kind of examples, because this is an ethical dilemma between two like independent bodies of research. Okay. One is ICMR, that is Indian Council of Medical Research. Another is ICAR, that is Indian Council of Agricultural Research. A dilemma between the two says कि ICMR wants to decrease the nicotine element and nicotine effects in the tobacco plant. On the other side, Indian Council of Agricultural Research wants to increase the productivity of the crop so that there is more benefit for the farmers. Also, there is the situation of trilemma when you talk about the political angle of this, that is the Article 21 of Indian Constitution and Directive Principles of State Policy, which mandate the state to prioritize public health over the economic benefits from tobacco farming. ठीक है. So the point is, if you see this thing as a trilemma, ठीक है, then there is three things. One is the fundamental rights of citizens, one is the citizen himself, and the ICMR and ICAR. If you talk about the dilemma of ICMR and ICAR, Article 21 can be the way out for them to understand that what should be prioritized and what not. This is something which can be asked as a case study. Okay. Lastly, there was a specific mention of some of the genes. I guess tobacco जो कि important चीज है, UPSC already पूछ चुका है, तो there is a possibility that these genes may be asked. CRISPR-Cas9 technology and CRISPR technology is being now researched upon again, so that we can mitigate the harmful effects of tobacco. How we can do that? कि transcription factor genes like ERF199 and ERF189. What researchers can do that? They will target these genes, and they have created an ultra low nicotine phenotype, a type which is resembling similar to these, and this thing reduces the level of nicotine to only 2 to 5% of the wild types, which are wild type levels. Okay. Once this genetic intervention, genetic change happens, then you can see that the tobacco plant has less nicotine. Next important gene is QPT2 gene. Knocking out this gene drastically reduces the nicotine production, but it has caused severe growth inhibition. Plant जो है उसमें growth ही नहीं हो रही है, rendering it unsuitable for agricultural use. Lastly, there is one more gene called as BBL gene family. And BBL gene की जो ये family है पूरी की पूरी, इसमें 6 genes आते हैं of this gene family. If you reduce this, this has reduced the foliar nicotine levels up to 94%. So this is all about tobacco. You should understand it. One more critical issue when you talk about the economy. ठीक है, तो tobacco industry is, मतलब बहुत टाइम से सुप्रीम कोर्ट की गाइडलाइंस आ रही है कि ये जो इंडस्ट्री है, आप जो प्रोडक्ट्स बना रहे हो, चाहे वो आप सिगरेट की डिब्बी बना रहे हो, उसके 80% एरिया पे ऐसा एडवर्टीजमेंट होना चाहिए जो इसको डिस्क्रेडिट करे कि आप स्मोकिंग ना करो. ठीक है, इसीलिए आप देख रहे होगे वो फोटोज ऑफ माउथ कैंसर एंड ऑल. बट व्हाट दे आर डूइंग इज दे आर डूइंग सरोगेट एडवर्टाइजिंग. सरोगेट एडवर्टाइजिंग मीन्स कि वो किसी और ब्रांड के थ्रू, किसी और इनडायरेक्ट मीन्स के थ्रू अपने प्रोडक्ट को प्रमोट कर रहे हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल the Bollywood actors or Hollywood actors promoting smoking. ठीक है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल the people wearing t-shirts with smoking and the logos of cigarettes on that. Some of the indirect promotions can be these. Lastly, we have this tradition to conclude the discussion with GS mains question, and this question talks about very, मतलब a one liner question it is, but 15 marks का question था 2023 के पेपर में. Question क्या था कि why did human development fail to keep pace with economic development in India? कि ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट और इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट दोनों आपस में बराबर क्यों नहीं चल रहे हैं इंडिया में, रीजन क्या है? तो सिंपल, आपने स्टार्ट किया इंट्रोडक्शन डेटा के साथ कि इंडिया अराउंड 10% का ग्रोथ रेट हमारा रहा है 2000 से लेके 2010 तक. नियर फास्टेस्ट ग्रोथ अमंग द वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमीज. हाउएवर हमारा परफॉर्मेंस ऑन एजुकेशन एंड हेल्थ पैरामीटर्स बहुत पीछे रहा है. अगर आप सेंसस देखो 2011 की, तो 74% हमारा लिटरेसी रेट है, और जेंडर गैप जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा है. ठीक है, ऑफ अप्रॉक्स 17% जेंडर गैप है. अगर आप NFHS 5 का डेटा देखो, जो भी रिसेंट मोस्ट डेटा है, द स्टंटिंग रेट इन चिल्ड्रन इज अराउंड 35% एंड वेस्टिंग रेट इज अराउंड 19%. तो सी हाउ ब्यूटिफुली दिस आंसर इज क्रिएटेड, जो कि एक्चुअल में फिट कर रहा है इस पैराडाइम को, जो ये पैराडॉक्स दिया जा रहा है इस क्वेश्चन में, दैट ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट एंड इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट आर पैराडॉक्सिकल इन नेचर व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट इंडिया. ठीक है, तो दिस इंट्रोडक्शन समराइजेस ऑल ऑफ द क्वेश्चन. दैट इज हाउ यू हुक द reader about this question. What are the reasons for this? You can see that the challenges which trickle down theory as posed, then talking about Amartya Sen's approach of capability development, and commenting on the macro approach with HDI based micro approach, 10 year 5 year 10 साल के जो 5 year plans थे वो हमने इसी basis पे रखे थे. Then talk about सुरेश तेंदुलकर कमेटी, पॉवर्टी के एस्टिमेट, सोशो इकोनॉमिक कास्ट सेंसस 2011 का. उसके बाद बाकी सारे रीजंस यहाँ पे आप पढ़ सकते हो. Lastly, again, the conclusion. It talks about Amartya Sen advocates that 6% of the GDP allocation should be to education and health, and this will be the way forward for such measures. And once you allocate your revenue to education and health, that will be the way forward for such thing that you will attain human development and the economic development in the parallel lines. Lastly, the National Education Policy 2020 and programs like Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan and Poshan 2.0 are the guide for way forward. Okay? With this, I conclude the discussion. Thank you for being in here. I wish you all the best.